Rolling out of Hot Springs, heading for Irwin. Right, so as I mentioned before, I decided to slack pack this little piece of the trail. So a guy came over from Hemlock Hollow Hostel and picked up my bag and gave me like a cheap little JanSport to put some water, snacks, and water filter in. Right, so got up, ate breakfast there in town. I was sluggish right away, and that would kind of inform some of my decisions that I'd make later on. Right, so that was not an easy 16, almost 16 and a half mile hike that day. A lot of up and down. Finally got to Log Cabin Road and met up with the dude who's going to give me a ride. It was like a mile or so to the hostel. Really cool little place. Nice little store they had there. It was very relaxing. It was in a bunkhouse, and it was actually a pretty neat little stay. After that, it was on to, so my initial plan was to hike 20 miles the day after that 16 and a half or so, and get to Devil's Fork Gap and get a ride from there to a hostel or something like that. But based on how I felt and the distance, I decided to split it into a couple of 10s. And it's a good thing I did. I did catch up with some folks that I'd met earlier down the trail, and had a campfire going, so it's pretty cool to sit around and chew the fat and catch up. Yeah, the hike from Log Cabin Road to Jerry's Cabin Shelter was some of the worst stretch of trail that I've hiked on this entire trip so far. It was horrible. It was just lots of steep up and downs, and even the relatively gentle slopes were covered with rocks and roots, and it was miserable. And there's a stretch on a exposed ridgeline. Despite the nice views, was difficult. You're climbing up and down it. If you look at the elevation profile, it looks like it's almost a straight line, but you're actually climbing up and down all these rocks and boulders, and it was just it's pretty frustrating because if you look at the elevation profile, it should be relatively gentle, but it was anything but. So it's actually a good decision to only go for 10 miles. Although if I'd had my druthers, I probably would have started earlier in the day because I didn't get out of there till lunch, because of the short distance. But it's hot, sweaty, and difficult. Guess I'm going to turn sideways to get around this one. Right, so now's where the real slacking begins. So I get into Devil's Fork Gap, and I get a ride from Sarah, who runs the Nature Zen Hostel, right? So I get over there after, it was like a 10-mile day, and start, talking about slack packing options, and you can definitely do some out of Nature Zen Hostel. Wound up staying there for about 3 days, and did 3 separate hikes slack packing. Very nice. Nature Zen Hostel was absolutely fantastic. They had a great little kitchen area. They had plenty of food for resupply, a little TV room, bathhouse. I wound up staying in a private room, which is just basically one of the bedrooms in a 3-room house. But the crown jewel of it all was this massage chair that you could sit in. And, you could take or leave the back part, but they had these little attachments that would come up, and they would massage your plantar fascia tendons on the bottom of your feet. It was fantastic. I was sitting in that watching the Braves game almost every night. Right, so the three pieces that I did from Nature's Zen Hostel. The first one was, it was Devil's Fork Gap to Sam's Gap. Right, so that was only like 8.6 miles, nice and easy to knock out. Slack packed it and got back in time for lunch. Pretty cool. Big Bald was a very cool view. It's a 360-degree panorama. I'm not quite going to rank it ahead of Max Patch, but it's very similar, and definitely worth hiking up there to it. I'd probably come at it from the north though. Terrain's a little easier, but really nice view up there. And to top it all off, they had some trail magic going on. There's a couple lived in the local community that come up a few times a year. Sometimes they're up there grilling, but they had like sodas, beer, chips, cookies, bananas. It was really awesome and much appreciated, because it's a big time pick me up to crest a mountain and then find that there's some free food and drinks, especially that rush of caffeine from the Mountain Dew. Just sitting here at Sam's Gap. I love that trail magic. Oh, again, Sam's Gap. The next day, I did kind of a backwards hike. So it took me out to Spivey Gap, and I actually hiked south back to Sam's Gap. And that was about 13.5 miles. Also not too bad. I actually made pretty good time. The terrain was fairly forgiving, and the trail was not too covered with rocks and roots. third day, last day there, they actually took me back out to Spivey, and I hiked north for about 10 miles to the Nolichucky River, where there's Uncle Johnny's hostel, and that's mile marker 344, and from there I got the ride into Irwin. Yeah, Uncle Johnny's is it's a little hostel right there on the trail. It's right by the Nolichucky River Bridge. It's got a little outfitter store, which I picked up my own personal slack pack from Osprey. It's super light, just need enough for water, snacks, and a filter. So got that going for me. I think I'm going to make slack packing more a part of my flow, because it's it's a bit easier on the joints and the knees. So yeah, makes the days a little bit easier, but you're still hiking in the mountains, so there's that. But yeah, it's a nice little spot. They're not really trying to rip you off, and location can't be beat. So Irwin's not exactly on the trail. They have pretty regular shuttles. They're pretty cheap. Uber even works. But they got, it's kind of a sprawling town. It's not as well put together as some of the other towns I've gone into. You have to walk a little bit, but they've got a Food Lion, they got a Dollar General, they got some Bojangles, Taco Bell, McDonald's. It's not too bad. I wound up staying in the Super 8 in a kind of a musty room, to be honest with you. It's not too bad, but at one of the liquor stores, they had a humidor, so I got my cigar resupply. So I'm pretty stoked about that. Right, so I don't know if you noticed, but I'm actually doing a bit less mileage lately. Try not to make it into a job. 15 to 17 miles a day, the occasional 20 thrown in. It's a bit of a grind. So, it's a grind anyway, but I've just found that the stretch between Hot Springs and Irwin didn't really lend itself to big days, both because of the terrain and the distance, just the way it would be broken up. So I took what was going to be a 4-day hump and turned it into a 6-day. And, it's actually a little bit better. You get a little time to relax in the afternoon, and it's another way to go about it. There's more than one way to skin this cat. But probably not going to take quite as many zeros that way. I'm thinking it might be all the way to Damascus before I take another zero, which is about 120 miles. So be mostly resupply and maybe like a half day or something along those lines. But I'll stay in hostels where I can, and slack pack if I can as well. So, hike your own hike.